Friday class, which is crash course on chord building with Matt Holt. Don't forget tomorrow we have Shredward's interview at 4:30. So here we go, Matt. Take it away.
Cool. All right. So, um, I don't think I know Logan or Ben. Oh, and there's Mika. So, welcome to the chord building clash, chord building crash course. Hard to say actually. Um, I was gonna say, could I have a show of hands who's done any chord building or scale work before, but I can't actually see anybody. Do we have video enabled on these on everybody? It'd be nice to.
They can if they want, yeah.
Okay. All right. They're choosing not to. Fair enough. All right. So, uh, I'm just going to start this little PowerPoint here, and we'll kind of get rolling here. Again, if I some of these concepts you may already be familiar with. If so, it doesn't hurt to review them. And hey, welcome, Sean. If you have any questions, feel free to pipe in. All right. So do that and share the screen. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is a little review of the notes on the keyboard. All right. So you are hopefully familiar a little bit with the keyboard. But if not, I'll just kind of go over what's going on. Basically, we've got white notes and black notes, obviously. And the white notes all have letter names, and the black notes are all letter names with either a hashtag sign, which we call a sharp, or a little funny looking B, which we call a flat. And basically they're named for the two notes next to them. All right. The notes on the keyboard are the letter name notes we use are A through G, and then it repeats. And basically the one we're going to start with is this middle C right here. All right. That's is this kind of L-shaped one, as they say up there, and at the bottom of the group of two black notes. So that's middle C. If we go up from there, and you can see the label down here, we have C, D, E. Sorry, actually, give me just a second here. Let's change something. There we go. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Right after G, it repeats the letter names to B. All right. So if I can get audio, or it'd be awesome to be able to hear people do this, but basically that middle C is there, and if we go up and name the letter names, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. All right. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and switch camera angles here. There we go. And so you can actually see me. I've got a little keyboard set up here. There's our middle C. And if we go up the white notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, B, C. It's hard to look at the camera and do that, so I'm just going to look at my hands. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. All right. Go back to the PowerPoint. Actually, I'll probably just leave this on. All right. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Cool. Awesome. All right. So as I said before, the black notes are named either sharp or flat, with the letter name either of the white note either above or below them. So for instance, this guy right here, you can call either C sharp because it's one note above middle C, or D flat because that's a D and it's one note below D. Right? So either these notes, these black notes here, can have two different names. All right? And we'll talk a little bit more about when you would use one or the other in a minute. So that's kind of the basic layout of the keyboard. And yeah, if you're new to the keyboard or kind of haven't done as much with note names, and you don't have it down 100% or the name's memorized 100%, that's okay. The big thing is just to kind of understand the concept of the ascending letter names, that the white keys are letter names and the black keys are letter names either with a sharp or a flat. But do try to remember that one note, and I think you hopefully can still see my keyboard in the little window, that middle note at the bottom of the two white keys, or sorry, group of two black keys is middle C. If you can remember that one, then you can figure out the rest. All right, let's talk about whole steps and half steps. Again, some of these things you may be familiar with, but I have to make sure we know them to go forward. So I'm just going over them as quickly as I can. So the half step is just the distance between two keys. Right, and so when I say two keys, I mean two keys right next to each other. So for instance, that C, right there in the middle C, where my little pointer is, and then the C sharp and or D flat right next to it, right, that's a half step. Right, so if I go up in half steps on the keyboard, it looks like this and sounds like this. Right? Now notice between some of the white keys, there isn't a black note. So between E and F, right, C, D, E, F, between these two notes, E and F, there is not a black key. So this is a half step. Even though it looks the same on the piano as a whole step between D and E, you know, it's still a half step because there's no black note. On the guitar, say this is a little more obvious. The half notes or half steps are a little more obvious because everything's the same. But piano, we're missing that. The half steps are not always from a black note to a white note. Sometimes it's a white note to another white note. And there's two places on the keyboard where that happens. All right. A good way to kind of keep track of this is to make sure when you're looking at the keyboard, you're looking at kind of the top of the keyboard up here as opposed to down here, because it's easy to miss the half steps and whole steps thing down here. So just like in all fractions, when you add two halves together, half step, to a second half step, that's a whole step. So anytime you add two half steps, you get a whole step. All right. Similarly, now usually that whole step, if you're starting on a white note and going to another white note, it's going to be a whole step. Obviously, a couple places that's not true, right? Between that E and the F, there's only a half step. So for there to go up to a whole step, you're actually going to go from white note to a black note, all right? All right. So let's go through and just see if we can find a couple of, if I can get somebody to name, we've got a couple little questions up here, right? Is from C to D, is that a whole step or a half step? Anybody? All right. Oop.
You can just unmute yourself if you want to answer.
Yeah. Anybody? Okay. Not quite sure if people just aren't interacting or what's going on, but from C to D, right? So we've got, there's a half step in between there. All right, so from C to D, we've got a whole step because it's 1, 2 half steps, all right? How about from G to A? All right, so that would be right here, G to A. Half step or whole step? Does anybody want to unmute and let me know you're alive out there?
It's a whole step.
Oh, who is that? I heard somebody for
Logan.
a second. Logan. Yeah, it's a whole step. Excellent. Cool. There are people out there. Yes. All right, so yeah, that's a whole step. How about from B to C?
Half.
Half step. Excellent. Thank you. Cool. Awesome. Does anybody have any questions about anything so far? All right. So, and this is kind of what we talked about a second ago, that it's not a half step or a whole step is not always just between two white keys, right? Because there are those two places where you don't have a black key between the B and the C and the E and the F. So those can be those are half steps, and in that case, a whole step would be from a white note to a black note. Similarly, if you're going from, say, the E flat or D sharp to the F, right? 1, 2, 2 half steps. The whole step can go from a black note to a white note. Okay, let's move on. So major scales. All right, so a major scale is basically a particular arrangement of half steps and whole steps that we use. And the easiest one to find on the keyboard is C. All right, and I'm going to show you some of this stuff on the guitar too in a little bit here. So the keyboard is just a little visually easier to lay out. So we're starting there. So notes in the C major scale are just going to be all the white notes starting on C and going up to the next C. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those 8 notes, that's a C major scale. We all heard, that's how you build all sorts of melodies are built with the major scale. All that great stuff. Right, all within the C major scale. Does that make sense? Right? So C major scale, cool. All right, so let's break down the half steps and whole steps on the C major scale. If we start on C, all right, we go up to D, we've got a whole step, right? So the first piece of the major scale is a whole step, right? And then we go up to another whole step because we have that black key there. All right, so far it's root, right? The root of the scale or the tonic of the scale, whole step, and then we go up to the F. Now notice, no black note there. Sorry if you're not looking at the keyboard. We have C, D, E. All right, that's where I am right now. And then to the F there's no black note, so that's a half step. So again, so far the order we have is tonic, whole step, half step. All right, then we go to the G, that's another whole step. Then we go up to the A, it's another whole step. So far we have tonic, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And then it's cut off here, but the next note would be C, which on the keyboard is another half step. There's no black note in between the B and the C. All right. So the order then is going to be tonic, and we don't count that. We don't start it by playing the first note and thinking whole step because you haven't. The whole step is a measure of distance, and you haven't gone anywhere when you played that first note. You're just starting. All right. So we have tonic. Actually, I'm going to start it down here. It's a little easier to see. Tonic, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. All right. So we basically have, so one more quick, whole, tonic, whole, half, whole, half. All right. Now let's apply that same idea to another scale. All right. In this case, they're suggesting the G major scale. So there's our G major. So we're going to apply that same pattern of half steps and whole steps to G major. So we have G, whole step, right? Then another whole step brings us up to B. All right. Then we have a half step, whole step, up to D, whole step, right? Up to E. Then another whole step. In this case, because there's no black note between E and F there, we have to go up to the F sharp to make that a whole step. And then we close it off with a half step for our G. So a G major scale, all right, and this is something you're going to see is that to maintain that order of whole steps and half steps, that pattern that creates the major scale, we start adding in black notes. All right. The C major scale is the only major scale that has no white notes or black notes. And the whole keyboard is obviously built around that. Or yeah, that has no black notes. All the other scales are going to have at least one black note. And that's because, again, to maintain that order of whole steps and half steps that defines the major scale, you're going to have to start adding in black notes. All right. Now here's a question. Why do we call it, well, we talked about why it's F sharp instead of F natural, but why do we call it F sharp instead of G flat if we're playing a G major scale? All right, we talked about how these notes each have two names. All right. Why do we call it F sharp instead of G flat, which we could also, would be another legitimate name? Does anybody have an idea? Anybody?
I've actually always wanted to know this.
Okay. All right, cool. So the reason is that when we're building a scale, we want to make sure it has all the letter names in it. And if we were to use G flat, we would the note names would end up being G, A, B, C, D, E, G flat, G, and we wouldn't have an F, and we'd have two Gs. Right? We'd have a G flat and a G. And also, if you're writing it, when you're writing out music in traditional notation, when you put a sharp in a measure, it stays sharp for that whole measure. When you put a sharp or flat in the measure, that note stays sharp or flat for the whole measure. Sorry, here, let's switch cameras here so you can see me a little bit as I explain this. So when you switch, when you make something sharp in a certain measure of music, it's supposed to stay sharp for that whole measure. So if you're writing a song and you have an F sharp to a G, you go the F sharp to G, say you're in the key of G, you'd have to write F sharp and then a G. If you were using it as a G flat, you'd have to write G flat, and then you have to put another symbol. This is a natural sign to show that the G is the next note is not a G flat, it's a G natural. So it also simplifies notation in traditional or writing out stuff in traditional notation. There's some other kind of rules about that that we'll talk about later, but I don't know. Does that make sense to you, Josh?
Yeah, now I'm a professional. I got it.
You got everything I learned at music school now. That was basically the sum of it.
That's all of it, huh?
Yeah. Needs to be in, why is that not, when did that leave present mode? There we go. All right. Cool. All right, so let's talk about, so that's kind of all the background. Hopefully that all made sense. Does anybody have any questions about note naming on the piano? All right. And again, just to show you real quick, actually, before we move on, I'm going to bust out the guitar just for a second here. And I'm going to get out of this and go. And there we go. So I'm just going to show you on the guitar that these same principles. There we go. The same principles apply. These same basic ideas are that if you. Oh, you know what? I did not try this out. Sorry. Let me. If I can switch this out. There we go. Back to Alt. All right. So on the guitar, you have these same ideas. The only difference is visually it's symmetric, right? The piano is built around the keyboard, or the keyboard, I'm sorry, is built around the note names. The guitar, because it has to be symmetric just by the nature of string instruments, you don't get this kind of visual distinction between the white notes and the black notes, right? But the same thing applies. If I same concept applies. If I play that open E, right, that first fret is an F, right, because that's a half step. That's one of the white notes on the. That's where one of the places on the piano where the two white notes are right next to each other, right? Here, though, that's not a G. That's an F sharp because on the keyboard, the F sharp is or the F and the G have a black note in between them. So that would be the black note between the F sharp, or between the F and the G, either an F sharp or a G flat. There's your G. All right. Now say I'm on the A string, right? between the A and the B, there is a black note. So that's not the B, that's the B. And then between B and C, there is no black note, so it's just a half step, right? So you still have this relationship of half steps and whole steps. And in fact, it's visually more obvious on the guitar. But the major scales, and that's why you get this kind of asymmetric shape for your guitar thing, where each kind of string has a different hand shape, because there's a different pattern of half steps and whole steps. All right. So, and I'll show you a couple more things when we get into guitars, or into the chords. All right. Go back to presentation here. All right. So one thing that's going to really help us in this concept is labeling is kind of being able to think of our note names independent of the actual names of the notes and kind of think of them functionally. And a good way to do that is to label them with numbers rather than note names, right? Because then we can use the same idea for every key. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to number our notes. The tonic is going to become 1, so that C becomes 1. D is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Sorry, my camera angle got a little messed up there. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Now, those of you who know the term octave will recognize, that's where the C repeats, right? And that's where the term octave comes from. If you didn't know that, it's the 8th note in the scale. Now, a lot of times, as the slide up there says, when you we'll refer to that octave as 1 again, because it's the same letter name as the original note we started on, right? So we'll oftentimes refer to that as 1, and we're going to do that for the purpose of this class. That's going to be 1, and it just starts over. So then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. All right. Any questions on that so far? Anybody? All right. So to build chords now, what we're going to do is instead of going up the scale 1 note at a time, we're going to go up the scale skipping notes. All right. So there's our C. We're going to skip over D and go to the E, and then we're going to skip over to go to the G. Right, now if we do that and get 3 notes that way, and we don't have to stop at 3, but we're going to stop at 3 for now. When we stop at 3 notes with that skipping every other note pattern, we get what's called a triad. All right, 3 notes, triad, right, just like tricycle, tripod, and that triangle is triad is the basis of most kind of Western harmony. The idea of a 3-note chord. Like I said, you can go up and add more notes to a chord, and get all sorts of fun things and cool sounding chords, but we're going to stop at 3 for now. All right. So when we play it like this, we call this chord the 1 chord because it's the triad built off of the first note in the scale. All right. Any questions? Nope. All right. Yeah. Oh. All right. So we can build this pattern off of any note in the scale, though, right? So if we go up to D, we can do the same thing. We skip over a note, F, G, right? So now we're kind of following the pattern 2, 4, 6. All right. Now that's if you can see on the where I lost my pointer. There it is. 2, 4, 6. All right. We get another triad. All right. So we can build a triad built off of any note in the scale. All right. 3, so on and so forth. Any note, as I said a second ago, any note in the scale can be the basis of a chord. And when we do that, say we start on that D, like we were a second ago, we call that the 2 chord because it's the triad built on the second note of the scale. All right? And again, I'm going to show you how to apply this to the guitar in a minute here, because the same concepts apply. It just looks a little different. And I accidentally skipped to the next slide here a little early, but so we have every note in this scale can be its own chord, right? We can build a chord off of every note in the scale. So with that in mind, think about what all the chords would be in the scale. You'd have a C major, which would be the 1 chord. We already said the 2 chord would be D minor, would be D. We'll get to minors and majors in a minute. All right? This would be the 3 chord, right? Where we're starting on the 3 and basically going 3, 5, 7. There's the 4th note in this chord, or in the scale. So that'd be called the 4 chord. Right? And again, that's 4, 6, 8, or 1, right? That's where the letter name repeats. And actually, I'm going to this down a little bit so we can get a little higher on the keyboard. Get that next octave in. All right? There's the 5 chord, 5, 7, 9, or 2, right? Because there's the 1. We can either call that 1, that next note, that next D, 9, because 7, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 5, 6, 7, 1, 2. But I'm going to call it 2 for now, just to keep it simple. So 5, 7, 2. The 6th chord, which would be 6, 1, 3. Or the 7 chord, which would be 7, 2, 4. All right? So there are 7 different notes in C major because there's 7 different chords in C major because there's 7 notes. All right? And any one of those notes can be the basis of the root note for a chord. All right. So those are the 7 chords. Now, let's talk a little bit about chord qualities. And most of you have probably heard of chord qualities before. You've heard people refer to chords as major chords or minor chords, maybe even diminished chords. What does that mean, really? All right. So a major chord is what you get when you play those first 3, the chord built on the 1 chord, or the 1, right? That first scale degree. The C, D, C, E, and G, right? 1, 3, 5 in the scale. Right? They're generally considered to be happy, positive sounding, violating, things like, right? Minor chords are generally thought to be, you generally kind of hear them as sounding sad, a little, I guess the anxious here, dissident. Never heard that one just for a minor chord, but yeah, just a little not as happy, basically. And that can change a little bit on context, and we'll maybe talk about that at the end. But they're basically just they're all built off of 3 notes. They just have a slightly different structure, and we'll talk to that in a minute. All right. So I'm gonna turn off the keyboard cam here, and I want to. I'm going to play a couple chords, and I want you to just try to decide if you think they are major or minor. All right. So here's. All right. So ask yourself, is that a major or a minor chord? All right, that's a major chord. All right. I'll do another one now. Ask yourself, is that major or minor? It's major. Do another one. Major or minor. And it's that's a minor chord. Kind of has that little sad. A major chord would be like that. Let's do a couple more. That's a major chord. And that one's a minor chord. So, and if you're new to this and you're having trouble telling the difference just by hearing them, that's not that uncommon. And context can have a huge effect on how chords sound. But it is something that with ear training and a lot of careful listening, you can definitely get much better at as far as like hearing chord qualities. And when people talk about ear training, that's one of the things they're talking about is really hearing those chord qualities. All right. So go back to our keyboard cam there. All right. So we could define a major scale by the number of half steps and the order of half steps and whole steps. We can do the same thing with the chords. All right. So let's go back to that C major. I'm going to scoot this over just a little bit. Recenter my main octave. All right. So in our C major chord, right, that one chord, if we count up the half steps between the root and that third scale degree, what we call the third of the chord for that exact reason, because it's the third note in the scale, we get 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that's 4 half steps. And then between the E and the G, or the third and the fifth note in the scale, which is we call it the fifth of the chord, we have 1, 2, 3. Right? So that, and so the order of, or the kind of interval breakdown between the first two notes is 4 half steps, and then 3 half steps between the middle note or the third of the chord and the fifth or the top note of the chord. 4 half steps, 3 half steps. And that formula is how you get a major chord. All right? So, yeah, we just talked about that. All right. So now this is where, and I'm going to depart slightly from this slideshow here because I just want to show you real quick that you can create a major chord starting on any note using this idea, right? That you don't always have to be in the same key. So if I go to say that E, all right, and I go up 4 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, and then I go 1, 2, 3. I get a major chord, and obviously that one's got a black note in it, so major chords don't always have all white notes. But I can create that same pattern. So I'm trying to get away. You can see my hands here. There we go. All right, and again, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps, and then 1, 2, 3 half steps, and there's a major chord. All right. Okay, back to the slideshow. So let's go now to a D major chord. Or sorry, a D chord in the C scale, a D chord in C major. In this case, our notes are D, F, and A. All right. So is that a major chord or a minor chord? Just listening to it. All right. If you answered minor chord, that's correct. All right. So the D chord in the key of C is a minor chord, which is an important thing to know. That I meant to say, is that you can have major chords in minor chords, sorry, in a major scale. All right. That not just because it's a major scale doesn't mean every chord you're building in that scale is going to be major. So several of the chords will be, but not all of them. All right. So let's talk about now how we construct that minor, or let's talk about the formula for that minor scale. All right. So minor chords are kind of flipped over from major chords. Instead of having 4 half steps at the beginning between the first two notes, you've got 1, 2, 3. All right. And then between the middle note and the top note, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So the formula for minor chords is 3 half steps and then 4 half steps, and you get that minor chord. All right. Now, real quick, I'm going to go back to guitar cam and just show you that same idea applies on guitar. So we're going to do a little rotate here. I'm going to stop the slideshow for a second just to make sure that All right. So there's our C major scale on guitar. All right. And if I play a C major chord, I'm just going to play the bottom notes of the chord. All right. So I've got the third fret on the C, second fret on the third fret on the A string on the note C. My second fret on the D string is my E, and then I'm playing my open G string. All right. So those three notes are those same three notes I played on the piano, the C, E, and the G. And if I count up half steps and whole steps, there's the tonic, 1 half step, then I'm going up to the open string, which would be a second half step, 3, 4. There's the first two notes, right, with 4 half steps, and then I'm going to count up 3 half steps to the next note, 1, 2, and then to the open string, 3. And there's my chord. All right, there's my C major chord. Let's do the same thing for D minor. Actually, I suppose I could, no, it doesn't work to do that open. All right, so in this case, I'm on the 5th fret there, but the same idea. I'm going to count up half steps. So it's going to be 1 half step, 2 half steps, 3 half steps. And there's the first to the middle note in the chord. All right. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing there. And then I'm going to go up to that A, right? That A note on the G string. All right, I'm here. There's the F, F sharp, and then open string, 3, 4, and I'm counting half steps again here. So, all right, here's the F. I'm gonna go 4 half steps from that again. 1, open string is 2, 3, 4. So, and that's the top part of the chord. So when I play that D minor chord, right, I've created that same formula. So the formula is the same on the guitar. It just looks different because the guitar is a totally symmetrical instrument and the piano is not. Does that make sense? It's I hope this is making sense. I'm not really getting any feedback from anybody, so I don't know for sure. You can also chat if you don't want. Okay, cool. If you don't want to turn on your mic or your camera, that's cool. There's also the chat option. So if you do have questions, feel free to throw in the chat. Oh, no, the chat option is not up?
No chat in here, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. I apologize. I'm not.
You have to talk.
All right, you have to talk. All right, so if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I had actually kind of timed this whole thing out anticipating people would ask questions, so maybe we'll get to the questions at the end. All right, so now we're going to go back to slideshow. All right. So if you go up C major, you know, I'm going to reposition this so we can see both octaves. It works a little better that way. All right. We can kind of label each one. We can kind of figure out which, aside just listening, you know, we can also figure out which one of these chords is major and minor based on the number of half steps and whole steps. So we talked about the one chord, the chord built on the first scale degree. That's major because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. D we've talked about. We've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now let's go to E, the third chord or the 3 chord. 3. We've got 1, 2, 3 notes or 3 half steps, right? So that's going to be a minor, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so there's our minor chord. Let's go to the F, which is the 4 chord. In this case, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps, right? And then 1, 2, 3. So this one's major. G chord, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3. So it's major. So just to review so far, we've had major, minor, minor, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. We go up to the 6th chord or the scale chord built on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th scale degree. And if you hear, right, see if you can figure that one out for a second before I tell you. All right, so that one should be minor. We've got 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, how about this one? Take a second, see if you figure that one out. All right, so this one's a little bit of a trick question. This one's actually called the diminished chord. And this is kind of the ugly red-headed stepchild of the diatonic chord structure, right? Because if we count the halves, first of all, you can hear it sounds a little funky. It's a little crunchy, right? Not the prettiest sound in the world. And if we count the half steps, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. This one actually has two sets of 3 half step groups, right? Instead of being 4 and then 3 or 3 and then 4, it's both these intervals are 3 half steps, right? So it's an extra crunch down chord, and we call it a. That wasn't supposed to come up. We call it a diminished chord, and that's kind of what they explain here, right? That there's 3 half steps between both notes in the chord, and they call it a diminished chord because it's even smaller than a minor chord. And you probably know from just speaking English that to diminish something is to make it smaller. All right. So that 7th one is a diminished chord. It doesn't get used as much. 90% of the stuff you're going to play in rock music is going to be major chords or minor chords. It's going to be these, the 1 through the 6th chord. The 7th chord gets used occasionally, but not very often. All right, so let's talk about Roman numerals. Hopefully you're familiar with the idea of Roman numerals. They're the numbers the Romans used, hence the term. If you're not familiar with how they work, that's something to check out. I don't really have time to fully explain that right now, so I'm just assuming everybody knows how they work. But we use Roman numerals when we're writing down these chords a lot of times. If we want to show the function of a chord in the key, or the way the chord fits into the key, right? You refer to the 1, the 4, the 5, or the 2, or the 6 chord. We'll use a Roman numeral because there's already so many numbers kicking around, right? We've got, it helps differentiate it from if we're just talking about individual scale degrees, right? Or if we're writing, on tablature and we've got fret numbers, or we're talking beat numbers, there's already so many digits, kind of normal digits running around, that the Roman numerals just help to separate the digits out from, or the chord functions out from all the other numbers. All right, and one of the quirky things about this is that to kind of identify the difference between a major chord and a minor chord, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. You can see here, so these are like the Roman numerals, and they're kind of, right, I is 1, right? So that would be the 1 chord. And then the 2 chord, because it's a minor chord, as we just talked about, we actually use lowercase i's for that, or lowercase letters. I've always thought that looks a little goofy, but it actually is a legit, that's how they do it. That's how they did it in music school. That's how I've always seen it done. And it works. It's an effective system to kind of tell instantly if something's major or minor. If it's got a lowercase, if it's in Roman numerals with lowercase letters, it's a minor chord. All right. So we talked about the 3 chord is also minor. Right. Then the 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That one's one of the major chords. So you can see here that's using uppercase Roman numerals. And then the 5 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, also major. So it's got the uppercase Roman numeral. The 6 chord, again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's minor. And so we use the lowercase. And then the 7 chord, right? It's got that minor first interval is minor, right? 1, 2, 3. So we think of it as a minor chord, but because it's also got that 3 half step top note, right? It's called a diminished chord, and to indicate a diminished chord, we put a little circle after it, and that just is an extra way to make sure we know that that's a diminished chord and not a minor triad. All right. So that's basically the whole shtick. That's kind of everything that that's kind of a basic crash course introduction to chords. And we can apply this same thinking to any key. We just have to account for the fact that, like we said in G, oops, sorry, you can't see that there, that that we're going to have some black notes and white notes, right? So if I played that same, took the the basic major functions we just did, and I applied them to G. I'll scoot this down a little bit. So we were there. I do all the same chord shapes. I would just add an F sharp. Actually, you know what? Even better. I'm going to move it over here. It'll be clearer there. All right. So in that case, all right. So to do that, I would just go. Here's my G. All right. There's the 1 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. All right. There's the 2 chord. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oop, 3 chord. And you hear how I didn't put that make that an F sharp, so that sounds kind of funky. That's got to be an F sharp. So the 3 chord, 1, 2, 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. I got it around my tripod here. 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 5 chord. Again, have to put that F sharp in there. Anytime we have an F in the key of G, it's always going to be sharp, unless otherwise noted. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. There's my major chord. Here's the 6 chord. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 7 chord. And again, that F has to be a sharp. All right, and we've got, it's kind of, there we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right, there's my diminished chord, and then we're back to the 1 chord again. All right, so that's true in any key, and you just have to keep the half steps and the whole steps the same. So questions. Again, I was kind of anticipating there being some questions during the actual presentation. So if you have any questions, we have a few extra minutes, or yeah, we've shot some extra time now. So if you have questions, now is the time to ask.
Hey, Matt, if you can maybe turn off your screen share so you can see the keyboard a little better too. But if anyone wants to unmute and ask Matt a question, he is a very skilled individual in this arena. Now would be a great time to do it.
And it doesn't have to be just about the specific chord stuff. You know, if you have general theory questions, I'm open to those too. Wow, tough crowd.
All right.
All right.
These guys already know everything.
Yeah, I guess so. So cool. So some really good things. Since we have a few extra minutes, I'm just going to do this in a couple of extra keys with the keyboard a little bigger. Hopefully that'll make sense. And I'm also going to take a second and show you how the same thing works on guitar. And in a way, you can apply the same thing to guitar, since I'm assuming several of you are probably guitar players. So I just did it in G. I'm going to do it in one more key on the keyboard, again, just to show you how it works there. So I'm going to go with the key of F this time. So the key of F, again, if I kind of creating that major scale, we have whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. All right, so we get this. All right, so instead of having a B, we have a B flat. All right. So if I wanted to create these chords in F, I'd have, there would be my 1 chord, right? That'd be the uppercase Roman numeral. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? There's my 4 half steps for my first major chord. 1, 2, 3. All right. Now when I go to the 2nd chord, right? I've got to have that B flat in there. I can't do this if I'm going to stay in the key of F. Right? I got to have a B flat. So when I do that, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. There's my minor chord. There's the 3 chord starting on A, which is the 3rd note. 1, 2, 3 in F. And again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I go up again, B flat there. And when I do that, I've got 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. All right. So there's my major. And then again, I'm going to skip over that B to the C. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So there's my major. Bring this around. 6 chord. Again, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 7. All right. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Our diminished chord, and then we're back to the 1 chord. All right. So you can do this literally with any key, and I think if you play all the chords in succession, you can kind of hear how they have that you're used to hearing these groups of chords together, right? So if I go. Right? That should sound pretty familiar and pretty like those chords all go together, as opposed to if I do something like this. Right? If I play chords outside of that structure, that scale structure, they start to sound very dissonant. Or if I'm playing within that scale structure, and then I play one note chord that isn't in that scale structure, you can hear it really kind of pops out. Right? That's not always a bad thing. If you're writing a song, sometimes you can use that to great effect, right? But it is just good to be aware that when you're in a certain key, right, when you're writing a song, say in the key of F, or playing a song in the key of F, that there's going to be these 7 chords are going to be the most consonant sounding chords, the most consistent with the key. All right. So real quick, I'm just going to show you how this applies to guitar, or how you can kind of think about this on guitar. So again, if we have our, and I'm just going to go back to C major here. Get that. All right. So I can take these chords. All right, there's my C major scale. Oop. Right. So now I'm actually going to go. Well, actually, we talked about this in C. So now I'm going to take that same idea. Here's my D major scale, and again, notice that on guitar, because it's a symmetrical instrument, we can use the same hand shape, and that's one of the great things. Right. So if I do that now, here's my 1, 3, 5, and again, I'm just moving that top one so I can play at the same time as the other chord, the other notes. All right. And then we go to the 2 chord. There's our minor chord. And then the 3 chord. All right. I'm on an F sharp there. I can actually, and then we go to the 4 chord. All right. And that's major. There's the 5 chord. That's major. And we go up to the 6 chord, and that's going to be minor. All right. And then finally, the 7 chord, which is going to be diminished. All right, you can see my hand shape there. And you can see there's those 2, and then back to the 1 chord. All right. So it's the same chord shapes. The only difference is on guitar, when we play those chords, say I play a D chord on guitar, or let's say a G chord, right? Say, well, there's 6 notes in that chord. Yeah, but they're just repetitions of the same note, right? So G, B are of the same 3 notes. So G, B, D are the first 3 notes, and you have another G, another B, and another D. All right. So all these guitar triads, well, that's just another G chord. We'll say F. In that case, I've got F, C, F, C, F, A, C, F. Right. So they're all one of those 3 notes. Now there are chords that have, and I said before, there are chords that have more than 3 notes in it. And that's when you have like an F7 chord, say, right? Actually, let's do it here. Say you have a G7 chord, right? They've added an extra note. In that case, they've added an F to the top of that chord, right? So you have G, basically G, B, D, F, right? 4-note chord. That's a whole other thing. But all your basic guitar chords are going to be built off of those 3-note triads. All right, that's kind of it then. That's kind of a crash course. Again, if you've never known anything about chords and you just got that, you probably still have lots of questions because that was a lot of information passed on very quickly. The course isn't intended necessarily to fully take someone from zero to full understanding of harmonic structure, but it at least is a start, gets you an idea. The big thing is not so much to remember the specifics to me, as if you're new to this, as much as it is to remember the logic and kind of the idea that, okay, there are these patterns of, there's a pattern that creates the major scale, and out of that pattern that is the major scale, you can create those chords, right? That there are these things called half steps and whole steps. That's a good place to start, because if you can kind of get your head around that, at least, like I said, maybe not the specifics, but at least the logic of it, then from there, you can kind of figure a lot of things out. All right. Again, any questions? That's about it. It's 12:58. Supposed to be an hour, so you got 2 minutes.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Matt for putting this together and presenting today. We will have another session tomorrow, which is Shred's interview, but there will be more music theory and more talk about chords in the master classes in weeks to come. So if you came today, make sure you come next time and build on this great knowledge. So again, thank you to Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
And you guys have yourselves a good weekend.